A flight attendant struck an elderly woman mid-flight, an act that would set off a chain of events no one could have anticipated, shaking the entire airline to its core. It happened in a heartbeat, too fast for most to register, but in its aftermath, nothing would be the same again. In seat 14C, a soft-spoken woman with hair gracefully turned silver by time quietly adjusted her seatbelt, trying to find a sliver of comfort in the thin cushioning of her economy seat. It was just after 11:30 p.m. aboard Flight 2127 from Nashville, and most passengers had settled into a daze, some nodding off, others distracted by glowing screens. Then, crack, a jarring sound sliced through the hushed cabin like a whip. Heads snapped around. Gasps erupted. A few startled passengers shot upright, clutching seatbacks in disbelief, trying to understand what had just happened. At the center of it all stood a woman, rigid, tense, her navy blue uniform taut across her frame, fists clenched and chest heaving. Her name tag read, Kelsey Morgan. Just inches before her, the woman she had struck sat still, motionless. There were no screams, no shouting, no wild gestures, just a hollow, aching silence. The elderly woman, her skin a warm and weathered brown, reached gently to touch the cheek that had been stung by Kelsey's hand. The mark was fresh, but she didn't rise. She didn't retaliate. Her eyes didn't even harden. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice calm, too calm. Confusion rippled through the cabin like a wave. From the back, a man shouted, "What the hell is going on up there?" Another flight attendant stood frozen near the front, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Kelsey's voice cracked. She wouldn't listen. She kept refusing to fasten her seatbelt, and she ignored my instructions. The elderly woman turned slightly toward her, composed, unwavering. "I never refuse," she said softly. "You never let me explain." Kelsey opened her mouth, but the words stuck somewhere between her throat and her pride. Her hands, once firm, now trembled slightly. Across the aisle, a teenage boy leaned toward his father and whispered, "Did that flight attendant just slap her?" His father gave a slow, grim nod. Everything in the air felt wrong, unsettled, heavy. Flight attendants are trained to remain composed, to de-escalate chaos. But this wasn't about rules or training. It was something deeper, something personal. The woman turned to a younger crew member, a gentle-eyed attendant named Eli Walker. "Could you please inform the captain that Evelyn Brandt would like to speak with him before departure?" Her name meant little to the passengers, but Eli hesitated. His eyes widened ever so slightly. He looked again, more carefully this time. Then slowly, respectfully, he nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Kelsey furrowed her brow, confused. "Wait, who?" she asked. Evelyn leaned forward and unzipped her black leather carry-on. From it, she retrieved a slim wallet and removed a small card. She didn't flash it. She didn't raise her voice or seek an audience. She simply extended the card toward Kelsey with grace. Kelsey took it with hesitant fingers. She read the name once, then again. Evelyn Brandt, Chief Executive Officer, Skyreach Airlines. Her breath caught in her throat. Her lips parted, but no words came. She simply stared, like her entire reality had just collapsed around her. But it wasn't just Kelsey whose world had shifted. Many still didn't understand who Evelyn Brandt truly was, because Evelyn had never chased the spotlight. She wasn't built for theatrics. Born in Jackson, Mississippi, Evelyn knew what it meant to be underestimated. Her childhood was marked by long nights, her mother cleaning empty office buildings, and her father, when he was still around, pushing carts down train yard tracks. She learned early how to stay quiet, how to survive in a world that expected her to disappear. She didn't charm investors at cocktail lounges. She didn't come up through flashy marketing departments or PR. No, Evelyn carved her way through the trenches, Logistics, maintenance, operations, audits. She earned respect not through smiles, but through sheer excellence. By the time she was named CEO, just 2 months prior, half the staff didn't even recognize her face. She liked it that way. So here she was, sitting quietly in 14C, cheeks still tingling from the sting, her ID card returned. And across from her, Kelsey Morgan stood crumbling inside. But Evelyn wasn't dwelling on revenge. No, her thoughts were with her mother, how she was often treated like she didn't belong. She thought about her 13-year-old grandson, already learning to move carefully, to avoid suspicion. She thought about every woman who looked like her and had been told to endure in silence. Eli returned quietly. "Are you all right, Miss Brandt?" he asked. She nodded once, controlled. "Has the captain been notified?" "He has," Eli confirmed. "He asked whether you'd prefer to come to the cockpit or if he should come to you." "I'll go," she said, her voice measured. Then she glanced toward Kelsey, who stood motionless near the jump seat. "But I don't want her addressing me again tonight." Her voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. But the authority in it was undeniable. Kelsey looked like she wanted to speak, perhaps an apology, perhaps another defense. But the moment passed. She looked down, ashamed. Evelyn rose from her seat. Every head in the cabin turned. Murmurs swept through the aisles. Passengers exchanged wide-eyed glances. Slowly they began to understand. This woman wasn't just a quiet old lady and coach. She was Skyreach Airlines. In the first-class cabin, Captain Jeff Rains stood waiting. A seasoned pilot with nearly 3 decades in the sky, his face shifted when he saw her. "Ms. Brandt," he said, voice tight, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were aboard. I, I wish this had happened under different circumstances." Evelyn shook his hand firmly. "It's all right, Jeff. I wasn't looking to be noticed. But this," she glanced back toward the coach cabin, "this can't be ignored." He nodded. "We're still on the ground." "I'm not canceling the flight," she said, "but I expect written statements from the crew, every one of them, and a formal incident report filed before we land in Seattle. Understood?" "Understood," he said quietly. "And when we land," she added, "I'll be contacting HR. She doesn't fly again until this is thoroughly reviewed." He wanted to say more, but thought better of it. He just nodded again. Evelyn walked back toward her seat, calm and unwavering. She wasn't looking to make headlines, but the reckoning had begun. Behind her, Kelsey Morgan stood frayed at the seams, 13 hours into a shift, bun askew, feet aching in heels she no longer felt. Her patience had snapped somewhere over Flagstaff. She hadn't wanted this flight. She hadn't wanted to be here at all. But bills were due, her sister needed help, and her boyfriend, well, he was too busy finding himself to offer anything real. But none of that could excuse what had happened, and none of it could save her now. Kelsey had agreed to work the extra shift, hoping the bonus pay would make up for the exhaustion. But now, sitting alone in the cramped galley at the back of the plane, she gripped a paper cup of water with trembling hands, replaying the slap over and over in her mind. What was I thinking? She wondered. It wasn't about the seatbelt. Not really. The woman had been calm, maybe a little slow, but never rude. But there was something about the way she looked at Kelsey, a look that made her feel invisible, unimportant, like she wasn't even worth the effort to impress. That stare had pierced her, stirring feelings she couldn't name. The truth was, Kelsey had been walking a thin line for months, smiling when she didn't want to, staying quiet when passengers snapped at her, swallowing her frustration when coworkers got promoted over her. People often talked about the perks of being a flight attendant, the free flights, the travel, but they never mentioned the exhaustion, the disrespect, and the way people treated her like a waitress in the sky. If she ever stood her ground, if she ever showed any kind of resistance, she was suddenly the problem, the one who needed coaching. That night, though, she'd had enough. She'd been running on fumes for too long, and when she saw the elderly woman, slow to obey her seatbelt request, something in her snapped. She didn't even think. Her hand had moved faster than her mind, and before she could stop herself, she slapped the woman. As the reality of what she'd just done settled in, Kelsey felt a deep sickness in her stomach. Eli, another crew member, came into the galley and leaned against the cart across from her. He said nothing at first, just watched her breathe heavily. "She's the CEO," Eli finally said, breaking the silence. Kelsey nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I know." She paused, her mind still reeling. "I know now." They sat in silence for a few moments before she asked, "Do you think I'm going to get fired?" Eli didn't answer right away. "I think that depends more on how you act from this point on than what happened before," he said quietly. Kelsey let her head fall back against the wall, her thoughts swirling. "I swear she looked at me like she wasn't afraid, like she had the power all along." Eli sighed, his voice soft but knowing. She probably did. Kelsey had spent her whole life being told she had to be better, more polished, friendlier, perfect in every way. But standing there in front of Evelyn Brandt, it hit her. This woman didn't have to perform. She didn't have to smile through it. She didn't have to prove anything. And somehow that irritated Kelsey more than she could admit. Now it was out of her hands. The incident had already been reported to the pilot, the crew had submitted their statements, and HR would be waiting when they landed. But the worst part wasn't just the loss of control, it was the way Evelyn had handled it. There was no shouting, no threats, just a calm, deliberate request for action. That quiet strength was devastating. What Kelsey didn't know was that everything that happened on the plane had been building long before they took off. There had been delays, frustrated passengers, and a crew that was already worn thin. By the time Evelyn boarded, the tension was already in the air. Kelsey had barely glanced at her as she boarded, offering only a mechanical smile. When Evelyn reached her seat, she settled in, adjusting her seatbelt slowly and calmly. But when Kelsey came by, something shifted. Kelsey demanded the seatbelt be fastened in a tone louder than necessary. Evelyn responded calmly, trying to explain she was simply adjusting it. Evelyn calmly pulled out her wallet and handed Eli her ID. "Evelyn Brandt," she said, watching Kelsey's shock. The power dynamic had shifted. Kelsey, who had been so certain of her authority, now felt small and powerless. The shame hit her like a wave. She turned quickly, retreating to the galley, face burning, chest tight. The passengers whispered, some shaking their heads. One woman even whispered to her husband, "She needs to be fired tonight." But Evelyn didn't flinch. She stayed composed, patient, in full control. She didn't raise her voice, didn't make a scene. She simply waited. As the plane began to taxi, the air felt thick with tension. Evelyn sat back, arms relaxed, her presence commanding without a single word. She wasn't the woman who'd been slapped. She was the woman who didn't flinch. When the plane landed, passengers remained quiet, unsure of what to say, what to do. Some even offered Evelyn small gestures of apology. She accepted them quietly, with a small smile. But she didn't need their apologies. She had already made her point. The story exploded the next morning, with news outlets picking it up and the video going viral. People debated, questioned, and argued. What if it had been someone else? Someone not a CEO, a black woman. That was exactly Evelyn's point. She didn't speak out to defend her title. She spoke out because she could. Most people in her position, especially black elders, were expected to stay silent, to endure. But Evelyn refused. She wanted the truth to be heard. Respect shouldn't depend on status, and bias can't be erased without first acknowledging it. A week later, Kelsey released her own statement. No lawyers, no spin, just her own words. She admitted her mistake, took responsibility, and agreed to undergo training. Evelyn had shown her more compassion than she deserved, and that stuck with her. Skyreach Airlines introduced a new training program weeks later, one created in collaboration with passengers, crew, and community advocates. Evelyn didn't put her name on it. She didn't need to. Her message had already resonated far beyond the cabin of Flight 227. People were thinking differently now, not because they were told to, but because they had seen the power of silent strength, of responding to harm with clarity and accountability. As the flight crew debriefed and HR scrambled, the ripples of what happened spread through the cabin, through the media, and beyond. The story wasn't just about the slap. It was about the change that could happen when someone stood tall in the face of disrespect, when someone showed that silence could be just as powerful as words. It was a lesson in humanity, in dignity, and in the quiet strength of a woman who refused to be overlooked.